on the field like when you're playing football. It's my honor to present the national championship trophy to Coach Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
To me, this is the ultimate team. All these guys bought into everything they needed to do to be the best players that they could be. There's more togetherness on this team than almost any team that we've ever had. And they had to overcome and persevere so much adversity through this season, and they've done it magnificently. And I'm so proud of this group for what they've been able to accomplish and going undefeated and winning the national championship.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Your man overthrown. Spit out the ball.
Hello there. Good morning. Welcome into Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. It's a great day to talk some football. We'll do that for the next 56 minutes here on your home for Alabama sports. Of course, the show is always available on Tide 100.9 app, available on your Android and Apple devices. Just search Tide 100.9 app there in your search bar of the Google Play or App Store, and it'll be available to you. All of our written content, all of our on-air content, wherever you need to be, wherever you got to go, you can have the Alabama Crimson Tide and all the latest news, analysis, and opinions following you there with you as well as high school football. That's in gear here, doing our best to cover those games as well and giving you all the information of your local news as well. You can also enjoy this show live on the live streams on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter at Off the Edge 109. You can also give us a follow on Instagram and TikTok as well at Off the Edge 109 as well. A lot of great content coming your way on all of those platforms as well. So likes, shares, subscribes, all those follows, whatever, all of that greatly appreciated here on the show. What I want to get into today is kind of get a little bit of a preview with D'Eriq King. A couple of things going on in the NFL as well, but also some big challenges that are facing these big four teams. I'm a big fan of what Josh Pate does at 247 Sports. I find myself watching some of the segments from his show in the morning as I'm prepping for my show as well. And he brought an interesting conversation, to the board last night or the day before, talking about some of the, how do you topple some of those big teams? And I want to, kind of get into that a little bit as well, specifically with Alabama, but also something that, might be an overlooked challenge. And he kind of referenced it a little bit, but an overlooked challenge for many of the top elite programs in college football today. But before we get too deep into anything, of course, the show is brought to you by Alabama Vintage, AlabamaVTG.com, at Alabama VTG as well on the Instagram account, where you can find all the latest items that come into stock and reserve them for yourself, and get on over to 2210 University Boulevard and pick those babies up as well. Charlie's got all the great content there for you, whether you need shoes, shirts, hats, jerseys, a great growing selection of jerseys there as well in the heart of downtown T-Town across from City Hall. Go give Charlie a visit and see what they've got in store for you there at Alabama Vintage. But we'll start with D'Eriq King, who he's healthy and he's confident, and as well as he should be. Mason and I were joking a little bit earlier about how he's a little bit overrated, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think he is a good quarterback. He's something that he kind of mentioned in press conference after practice a day or two ago, was that this is the first offseason where he hasn't had to learn a brand new system. Now, some of that, of course, brought on by himself, moving from Houston to Miami. But what a brilliant move that turned out to be, by the way, because he's one of the most marketable players in all of college football. And his biggest and most important season is still ahead of him. He's played a long time for Miami. He's played a long time in college football, period. But he's made a name for himself, and rightfully so. He's an electric player, a great runner, a useful passer, and truth be told, Miami's built something down there, right? Like they're not back. I don't think they're back. I still anticipate them to lose the game, biased or not. But when you look at what the Hurricanes bring to the table, and sticking to my guns that playmakers make plays, I've kind of let out the warning, that D'Eriq King, at the very least, will have a big game against Alabama, despite, standing my ground that Alabama's defense is the best in college football, might be one of the best Alabama's ever had, relative to the era of what we're dealing with in college football and the way the rules favor the offenses and so on and so forth. But when you really kind of look at what D'Eriq King brings to the table, his athleticism and all those sorts of things, he's set up for success. And that's fine. That's fine. I don't care about yards, right? If I say that D'Eriq King is going to give Miami 3 20-plus yard runs against Alabama, but none of those go for touchdowns, then what's it matter? Sure, it might set up points. That's a different story. But what's it really matter if he's just getting a lot of yards? Remember a few years ago against Texas A&M? This was actually my first time in Bryant-Denny Stadium, and Kellen Mond ran all over Alabama's defense. All over. Take away the sack yardage, he had over 200 yards rushing. And it didn't matter. Alabama crushed the Aggies that year, as they tend to do. And that's not to say, well, the trend continues against athletic quarterbacks. Nick Saban defenses struggle against athletic quarterbacks. That's not what I'm saying at all. Like, sure, there's a bit of a trend there, but in case anybody hasn't noticed, athletic quarterbacks tend to be a problem for all defenses because they're difficult to defend. That's why they're so popular in today's game. That's why we go into the NFL draft and we take about 5 marks off of Mac Jones's game because he's not capable of doing that. There's a reason for that. But that being said, I don't know that it necessarily translates into something where you need to be concerned, just because he might get those kind of plays out of himself on September 4th. But that being said, it is very interesting to hear him kind of talk about this matchup as we get closer and closer. We're 10 days away. 10 Mac Jones, AJ McCarron, Reuben Foster, so many great names. JoJo Earl wearing the big 1-0 this year. Plenty of names to be excited about on that front. But 10 days away from Alabama versus Miami in Atlanta on September 4th to kick off the Crimson Tide's 2021 campaign. And D'Eriq King's had some fun things to say. Now, this is from about a week ago on Stephen A. Smith's brand new show over at ESPN. But here's what D'Eriq King had to say about the matchup with the Alabama Crimson Tide in 10 days.
Miami. So let me go to the program here because y'all open the season September 4th against the reigning defending national champion Alabama Crimson Tide, and you will be ready for that game. You suffered an ACL injury, if I remember correctly, in the bowl game against Oklahoma State, but you're back. You'll be ready to go. What are y'all thoughts about that upcoming game? I mean, game 1 against Alabama. What's the expectation in your mind?
I think there's no better way to open up your season versus, the best team of the last decade, right? Obviously, won a national championship last year. It's a big task. They have a great team, probably the best head coach of all time. So I think we're looking forward to the opportunity to go out there and compete against those guys, especially in a neutral site in Atlanta in front of thousands and thousands of people. So we just, practicing every day, just getting ready, for our opportunity to show what we can do.
If I remember correctly, y'all opened the season in terms of the polls. Y'all were ranked like number 14. Is that too low, too high? How do you feel about that?
I think the good thing about, preseason rankings is that they don't matter after a couple of weeks of the season, right? So, I think you said we were in top 15, number 14 ranking, but we got to go out there and play every week like we're not ranked. You know what I mean? So we got to go out there and give everything we got and just try to win every single game we play.
So where do you feel y'all will finish the season? My last question to you. What kind of season are you expecting? Where do you think y'all will finish?
I'm a very confident guy. I think we're going to finish number 1. I'm never going to say we're going to lose to anybody. I'm super confident, and I'm confident in my teammates.
Well, that means if you number 1, if you're saying we could finish the season number 1, that means you confident that you can start off the season knocking off the number 1 team in the nation, the reigning champions. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'm a competitor. You know what I mean? I'm not going to ever go out there and say we're going to lose this game or that game. So, like I said, I'm looking forward to playing those guys. It's a great task. One of the best teams of my lifetime of the last decade. So I'm excited to play those guys.
Listen, man, really appreciate meeting you. Really appreciate talking to you. Good luck this season. Glad to see you healthy enough to be back on the field. Wishing you good health and success this season and beyond, my man. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.
All right.
There's D'Eriq King on the Stephen A. Smith Show. And I got to say, like, I don't hear a lot of disrespect out of that, right? You want to be confident. You want to feel like you can go out and beat Alabama. If you lose before you even step off the bus, you've done yourself in. You can't think too heavily about the colors that are across from you. You have to play your game. And I respect that out of D'Eriq King. But that's why I say when you kind of measure his confidence with the fact that he's healthy, he brings a lot to the table. Now, that being said, Miami, they still have some battles going on across their offensive line. They've had to deal with a lot of injuries, including their star left tackle, Zion Nelson, who's a big deal, but he's not practicing right now. When you think about Chris Allen and Will Anderson lining up across from him, you feel a little bit more confident because both of those guys have been getting practice reps. Chris Allen not playing in the scrimmage wasn't injury related, so it's not a concern, right? So when you kind of look at that situation and you feel all the depth on this defensive front, then you're saying, oh, well, that's a big positive, right? Well, at the same time, that means that there's more scrambling opportunities for D'Eriq King. And that's where things get a little bit shaky. And you look at those off-ball linebackers, you look at Christian Harris, and you look at Henry To'oTo'o and what they bring in regards to their speed and athleticism, then you start to kind of put the picture together. Well, they should be able to handle things nicely. But if you're, say, in man coverage for some reason, I mean, it's part of the scheme. But if you're in man coverage and D'Eriq King takes off, it's a little bit difficult to find that guy if you're not in a spy, right? So, you've got the pieces on defense to kind of corral him and to make his life, relatively difficult. But at the same time, an X-factor player like D'Eriq King lining up against Alabama in 10 days does provide quite a bit of excitement. And for those hoping that Alabama falls on September 4th, that's kind of the thing they have to lean on, is that D'Eriq King would be so exciting and that their defense, the Hurricanes that is, makes one or two plays to be the difference in the ball game. Those are the kind of things you need to beat in Alabama, right? Who knows, right? As far as I'm concerned, Alabama's winning the game by 3 touchdowns, but that doesn't mean D'Eriq King won't make his impact, similarly to how Kyle Pitts did last year and similarly to how the Ole Miss Rebels handled the Alabama defense a year ago. Those sorts of kind of tendencies where playmakers will make their plays because of the way the college football exists in the rule book and on the field. It just provides excitement. I think we'll get a good game and Alabama will eventually lead out, but we are 10 days away. So more analysis on the Hurricanes forthcoming. We'll continue to dive into that conversation as we get closer and closer to that ball game. Interesting little nugget before we go to break. We might touch on this a little bit on the other side, but Trevor Lawrence officially named the starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Just bizarre to me. Yeah, there was a competition. Urban Meyer's a clown, man. Urban Meyer is a clown. But where there is true competition, Mac Jones today in practice had a hell of a day. 25 of 27 on his first few passes, his first few reps with the ones as they have joint practice against the Giants, including 18 in a row. I know he threw a couple of touchdown passes as well. Mac Jones is lighting it up, man. He's taking advantage of his responsibility, or he's taking advantage of this opportunity, I should say, and putting forth some responsibility on himself to create a chance to be a leader on the team and continue to grow with this team, trash talking with defenders and strutting across the field and those sorts of things. Having that swagger that kind of brings him to the show, right? That swagger that kind of gets overlooked by a lot of folks who doubt many things in his game. He's a confident dude as well. He has the skills, he has the ability, and he's not going to go down without a fight in this struggle for the starting quarterback job with Cam Newton in New England. It's very exciting to see what Mac Jones is doing here with first team reps, and we'll see how it kind of continues as the preseason comes to a close this weekend. We'll take a break and come back, continue the conversation here on Off the Edge. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports.
The Alabama football countdown clock is driven by Crawford Insurance, Tuscaloosa's low-cost auto insurer. Call 752-6489 for a free quote today.
Roll Tide!
There are 10 days until Alabama football.
Dominate!
We're planning a trip to Spain later this year.
But our Spanish is...
It's pretty bad. So we're using Babbel.
Babbel's conversation-based method teaches you real-life words and phrases. And with Babbel's interactive, bite-sized lessons, you'll remember what you learned.
There's no easier way to learn another language.
Ahora hablamos español.
He just said now he speaks Spanish.
Babbel, language for life. Now try Babbel for free. Just go to Babbel.com. That's Babbel.com.
Everything is better at Benton Nissan. At Benton Nissan of Bessemer and Benton Nissan of Hoover, you get even bigger selection. We have more than 180 new Nissans on the ground awaiting immediate delivery. Even bigger savings with financing as low as 0% APR across our most popular models. Plus, every new Nissan comes with a lifetime powertrain warranty. Drive a little, save a lot at Benton Nissan of Bessemer and Benton Nissan of Hoover.
Benton Nissan, your friend in the car business.
For well-qualified customers, see dealer for details. N7621.
Don't miss a play at the Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Your front row seat to all the action. Place bets on all professional and most college sports at the counter, kiosk, or on your phone. Then catch the game on one of our 20 big screens from the comfort of the newly remodeled Timeout Lounge. Plus, the PRR Sports app gives you access to live, in-play sports betting. Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Be more than a fan. Be a player. Must be 21.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
A hot summer afternoon, partly to mostly sunny with a few isolated showers or storms through the evening hours. The high today 94, tonight's low 72. For tomorrow, partially sunny with a chance of scattered showers and storms. The high at 91. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 91 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
We aren't going anywhere. Off the Edge is available in the podcast center on Tide100.9.com.
Hey, we're back here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. Jacob Harrison here with you. Bryant Horn producing the show. Brian, I know you saw this. You had to. Sports Center had the tweet yesterday. If you can only pick 3 movies from this list of 9, which ones would you have to keep? Friday Night Lights, Rudy, Coach Carter, Remember the Titans, The Blind Side, Space Jam, Rocky, Glory Road, or Miracle. Got to say, this one's kind of easy for me. Curious if anybody else has any thoughts on this, of course. But Friday Night Lights is like the greatest movie ever made, period. And then I got to go with Rocky and Space Jam. What about you, Bryant Horn? What movies are you picking out of this group of 9?
From what I remember, I think I went Friday Night Lights because, like you said, the movie's incredible. I love high school football, so and I think it's better than Remember the Titans.
Well, I said Remember the Titans is the
which
best movie ever made. So
I thought you said no. You said Friday Night Lights is the best movie ever made.
I didn't mean to.
Oh, I went Friday Night Lights, Rocky, and Miracle.
Interesting. I feel like you got to have Rocky. Like there's no dismissing Rocky. And I understand anybody that would go with Rudy or like you did with Friday Night Lights. But Remembering the Titans, man, that's such a we would watch that in middle school as we waited for game time. There'd be a few weeks we'd watch football movies or whatever, and oftentimes we'd vote on which one we'd watch, and we just end up watching Remember the Titans quite often. And that's in Little Backwoods, Alabama, as well. Gotta love Remember the Titans, but hey, great sports movies all around. Hopefully, we get to see more. In the future.
How do you feel about We Are Marshall?
I love We Are Marshall, and if it were a part of that list,
so underrated.
If it were a part of that list, I would probably kick one of those. I would probably kick Space Jam out, to be honest.
Space Jam is like, I've gone through this weird mental, change where I used to think Space Jam was really good.
Oh, it's not a good movie.
It's not.
No,
it's not at all. It's all nostalgia.
Yeah, it's all nostalgia. It's fun because it's Michael Jordan and Bugs Bunny, man. Like, and Bill Murray, plays a pivotal role in the final plot. Like, come on, like that's it's not a good movie. It's just for the nostalgia's sake. But at the same time, We Are Marshall is an incredible movie, and I encourage anybody who has not seen that movie to go watch it. the story is it feels so real. Matthew McConaughey does an excellent job as the coach in that movie. But the story is so real, and it's something, like you said, that is so overlooked, and it really shouldn't be. And you got to appreciate what that story brings, and how difficult it was when they finally had to go out there and they get the waiver to have an all freshman team, and they go out there and they get lambasted by Murray State. And then they're trying to figure out how they're going to compete with West Virginia in their rivalry, and West Virginia hands it to them too. So they're hoping for that one big victory against Xavier, and miracle play kind of pulls it off. But it also kind of leans into what the evolution of recruiting was, but also how difficult it was to rebuild that football team and get back out there. And despite we always talk about the local atmosphere, and when we're talking about high school football, how a community gets behind a football team. Well, Marshall is kind of the same way up there. It's a smaller community, and I've seen that kind of in places like Troy, where community really backs their program, even though they're kind of cut off from the rest of the world. It's really exciting to see that, and I encourage anybody who's not seen that movie to go and check it out. Another guy that is taking advantage of his opportunities is Damian Harris. It looks like you're about to have an all Alabama backfield there up in New England. Sony Michel was traded this morning. I mean, bright and early this morning, about 6 a.m. to the Los Angeles Rams, which means they were up at like 4 o'clock trying to make that trade happen.
They could not sleep. You know that Sean McVay was just he was sleepless.
I mean, stressing. They don't have a running back. Well, they do now, but
he was in his Malibu mansion, just eyes wide open. He was like, "We are gonna suck unless we get running back."
Well, first of all, I don't know if you go from Todd Gurley to Sony Michel, two guys with bad knees from the same university. You don't think there's a little bit of bad juju there?
I still can't believe that Todd Gurley turned out the way. I know obviously he got injured, but I thought Todd Gurley was going to be one of the next great running backs in the NFL.
He was while he was healthy.
Yeah.
You got to stay healthy. That's the number one thing as a running back. We'll see if Sony Michel can do that out there with the Rams. But regardless, that opens up the door for Damian Harris, who was a 3rd round pick. And, he's kind of built this up, right? He's been taking the early snaps for the Patriots in these preseason games. It's the Patriots. He's got to share time with James White. Ramondre Stevenson, the Oklahoma pick. He's a 5th or 6th round pick for the Patriots this year. He's going to play a role as well, especially in that, goal line, short yardage situations. But I mean, it's exciting though to kind of get to that point where Damian Harris is lined up to be a starting running back in the NFL alongside Mac Jones. I mean, Mac obviously still has to win the job. Damian still got to share time. But it's kind of really bizarre when you think about the fact that everybody hated the Patriots for so long, and justifiably so, I guess, if you're one of those people that hates greatness. I mean, I only hate them because they blocked my team, right? Like that's it. But if you're a hater of greatness, then I understand it. It kind of is what it is, but kind of ironic too when you look at the fact that these guys go from being great players at Alabama to now being the players that have to kind of be the foundation for the future of a once great team looking to get back to that place of relevancy. So props to Damian Harris. But like I was saying earlier, with Trevor Lawrence being named the starting quarterback of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and all this noise that's going on with Justin Fields and Andy Dalton up in Chicago, just name the quarterback, man. Like, stop with all this secrecy.
He did. It's Andy Dalton, is it not?
It is, but what I'm saying is don't be foolish about it, because you watch Andy Dalton play football, you watch Justin Fields play football, and it's not the same. It's not the same. Like the level of ability, like Andy Dalton is a good quarterback, and Justin Fields has the potential to be great. And you don't want to stymie that by putting him behind a less than ideal offensive line. But come on, man. Like, it's the same thing with acting like there was a quarterback competition between Trevor Lawrence and Gardner Minshew. Minshew hasn't played bad football. This much is true. But Trevor Lawrence is a generational talent. Like, I don't understand. Like, with Tua, there was an understanding there. You understood why Ryan Fitzpatrick was the starter. Tua's coming off the injury, the weird offseason, all those sorts of things. It's understandable. But when you put him in, let him be the quarterback. Let him fail. If he's going to fail, let him fail. With Mac Jones, if there's an understanding there because Cam Newton's the incumbent. If Mac Jones wins the job, though, then put Mac Jones out there. Whoever gives you the best opportunity to win the games. And it goes across the board in the NFL. Like, you can look back and you say, well, it's better to allow these quarterbacks to sit and learn. That's baloney. It really is. You can look back and you can say, well, look what happened to Aaron Rodgers. Look what happened with Patrick Mahomes. Those are anomalies, my guy. That is not the norm in modern football. You're not afforded the opportunity to have a Hall of Fame quarterback in front of another Hall of Fame quarterback. You're not afforded the opportunity to have a great player like Alex Smith sit in front of Patrick Mahomes very often when you're in a position to draft one of those guys. See, the conversation doesn't go out west with the San Francisco 49ers because neither of those guys is playing their best football right now. Neither of them are. So it makes it difficult to determine who's the guy. With the Broncos, neither guy's playing their best football. So it's difficult to determine who's the guy. But when you're going across the board and you're looking at situations like with what's going on in Chicago and just playing the mind games and the word games with Urban Meyer in Jacksonville, you're delaying progress. Because if they're not on the field, if they're not getting reps on Sundays, they're not getting enough reps throughout the week to improve as a player. And that's bizarre to me. Because you're not going to go through the whole season splitting reps between Justin Fields and Andy Dalton if Andy Dalton's the starter. Why would you do that? So therefore, at what opportunity is Justin Fields getting better? There is none. There is none. He's not getting better. That's the point.
Okay, don't laugh at this, but do you think maybe Coach Nagy, it's Nagy, right?
Not Nagy, yeah.
Yeah, Coach Nagy is just trying to imitate greatness in the great Bill Belichick because...
Well, he comes from the Andy Reid tree.
Yeah, I know he does, but I mean, like, it's hard not to try to, imitate Bill Belichick because essentially Coach Belichick is doing the same thing because...
He's not, though, because Cam Newton is the incumbent. And if Cam Newton is playing well enough to hold his job, then he'll keep his job. And if Mac Jones plays well enough, then he'll eventually be the starter. It might not be week
it'll
one.
It'll be like that in Chicago, right? I mean, if Andy Dalton goes out there in
we
the
don't
first
know.
series of week one, he throws a pick six, and then they put in Justin Fields. And
well, they're not going to be that hasty about it. But
I know.
But
you know what I'm trying to say, though.
To a degree, yes. But also... Belichick's never been in that spot, first of all. This is the first time he's ever been in this spot as a head coach. But when it comes to having a rookie quarterback behind somebody, yeah, this is his first chance.
Tom Brady
was not a rookie when he started. Drew Bledsoe was already the quarterback when he got there.
Whenever
he was a second year quarterback when he took over. And he was the 6th round pick. He wasn't groomed to be the starter. Like, that was all circumstantial. So it's not comparable. But when it comes to what's going on, like we're not idiots. Like don't talk to the media and to the fans like they're idiots by saying, well, Trevor Lawrence, has to earn the job. He earned the job by being the 1st overall pick. Justin Fields earned the job by being the 11th overall pick. You brought in Andy Dalton as a stopgap because you couldn't get Russell Wilson. You don't tell Andy Dalton, hey, you're the starter the second you sign him when you've got a top 15 pick and the opportunity to draft a quarterback. You don't do that. And you don't feel sorry for him when you say, well, we drafted a guy who's better than you. Sorry. You're going to have to fight for that job because this is football and this is competition. Because down the road, when we get to the point where Bryce Young has left the Alabama Crimson Tide and we get to the point where Ty Simpson has joined the Crimson Tide or Arch Manning has joined the Crimson Tide or whoever, and Jalen Milroe or Paul Tyson is playing out of their minds in practices, and those guys come in, we have to say, well, you're going to have to fight for the job, guys. That's fairness, right? That's competition. That's what you want. You don't just automatically decide, well, the incumbent's already here, man. He's the starter. That's not how it works. It's not how it should ever work unless a guy has proven himself to be that elite caliber player to the point where you don't need the competition at that position when you're talking about a franchise quarterback. But when you've got overturned and you got to find the right guy, I agree that there's not enough patience, but if that's the case, then you got to live within that world and make something of it. We'll take a break, continue the conversation. 205-342-9904 if you want to join the show and lend your thoughts on anything. More than welcome to do so here on Off the Edge. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
Diabetes, high blood pressure, anxiety meds, everyone's on them. If you're a 50-year-old male, maybe a bit porky, and you may even have type 2 diabetes, $1 million of term insurance may only cost you about $200 a month. Call Term Provider. Speak with Big Lou at 800-777-1225. Big Lou will find a term life policy for you even if you have type 2 diabetes, are overweight, or have high blood pressure. Term Provider has helped thousands of people like you who think they can't afford term life insurance. To buy $1 million of affordable term life for you, all you need to do is call Big Lou at 800-777-1225. Lou will make sure the scales are tipped in your favor. Call 800-777-1225. Big Lou will answer your call and work to fit you into a term life policy that you can afford. Remember, Big Lou's like you. He's on meds too. Call 800-777-1225. 800-777-1225.
Relax and recharge with all your buddies while you watch all your favorite games at R&R Cigars. They have a large walk-in humidor with a great selection of name brand cigars for all flavor profiles and taste preferences. R&R Cigars is Tuscaloosa's only whiskey bar and several big screen TVs to watch your favorite team with theater seating and Wi-Fi. So if you're looking for the ultimate venue to watch all your favorite sports, stop by R&R Cigars on 6th Street in Tuscaloosa and next to Winn-Dixie on McFarland Boulevard in Northport.
Walk-On athletes put everything they've got into the game. Walk-On Sports Bistro puts everything we've got into bringing you game day with a taste of Louisiana. Over 70 big screen TVs. Mouth-watering Louisiana cuisine. Po' boys, gumbo, voodoo shrimp, plus fan favorites like juicy burgers and fresh salads. Made from scratch with ingredients you can't help but crave. Now open in Tuscaloosa, 675 Skyland Boulevard. Walk-ons.com. Walk-On Sports Bistro, more than a restaurant.
Follow Off the Edge on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for live streams and instant analysis. Off the Edge with Jacob Harrison continues.
We're back here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports. Jacob Harrison here with you, Bryant Horn producing. We've gotten even further into this alliance thing, right? Yesterday, we get the contract deal. It's not even a contract. How do you even describe something that has gone? I am flabbergasted by the fact that this thing exists because it poses no threat to the SEC. And despite saying that that's not the intention, it's so clearly the intention. Like, you can say one thing, everybody's talking out of both sides of their mouth with this thing, but then you look on the other side where it's, well, this is about scheduling and the college football playoff. And I've said it a few times, like, you're not helping yourself with the college football playoff thing. If you try to block that, you're still continuously keeping yourself out, right? And when you're looking at the scheduling, well, you can't do anything new or different until 2035 practically. Sure, you can sprinkle in a few things here or there, maybe knock out some of those cupcake games, but if you do that, your record does go down. Your record does become a little bit less manageable. Your record does become out of your control a bit, and that's not ideal whatsoever. So why would you put yourself in that position? And then if it's about the philosophy of these places you're not nearly as in tuned as you are. But one thing that stuck out to me about what was in kind of the press release of this weird alliance that exists, but also, formally does not, is that it was described as by one of the commissioners of one of these conferences as 3 adults with an understanding, or 3 adults with an agreement, basically, to determine what is best for college football. How do you determine what's best for college football without including the best conference in college football? How do you determine what's best for college football without even mentioning the Big 12 and what they bring to the table, or the ordeal that they are going through at the current place in time? How do you get to determine what's best for college football when your conferences themselves cannot contribute to the success of college football as a national brand? Sure, Ohio State and Clemson, that's 2 of 41 schools. What can you possibly contribute? You can't look at the TV deals and tell me that that's going to get any better, because nothing that any of those conferences bring to the table come even close to what the SEC network is. Nothing. You don't have the personalities on the shows. Big Noon Kickoff on Fox Sports pales in comparison to College Football Game Day. Pales. It's not even close. Nobody watches it unless you're an Ohio State fan and, College Game Day is not there. It's Big Noon Saturday.
Then you still don't watch it.
And why would you? Because you just get the opinions of 3 USC guys who aren't good enough to be on any other station.
Yes.
Nobody.
I'll be honest. I don't watch the SEC network Game Day spinoff. I only watch Game Day.
But at least you know everybody that's on there.
Yes.
You know Laura, you know Tim, you know Marcus, you know the bald guy, and you can trust what they say because they're established people, right? They're established in what they do. And that's what makes College Game Day so good. But with Big Noon Kickoff, it's here's Urban Meyer for 2 years, but you've also got Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart and Brady Quinn and some other guy that I've never even heard of. You're not in a competition there. And then you look at the Pac-12 network and how miserably that failed. The Longhorn network was more successful than the Pac-12 network. You tell me where you can watch the Pac-12 network.
Sling.
That's
TV.
it. That's it.
Hey, I'll be honest. There are many nights, especially during quarantine, where I would turn on Pac-12 network and it would be 2002 USC UCLA, and I'd be like, you know what? I'll watch it. But that's about it. They only play old games.
Because that's the only value that they have, to be honest, is to look into the past. But and I mean the SEC network plays old games too. But my point is that for these 3 guys to kind of stand where they are, and for the Pac-12 guy to commissioner to be a guy that comes from the business side of football and not from the football side of football, you're not in a position to tell anybody what's best for college football. I'm sorry to say it. If you want, because this was kind of a conversation that came up when the Baylor thing blew up, right? Because of the lack of rules and because of where the NCAA is. The NCAA is the weakest it's ever been. And that's understandable. With the NIL thing going the way it has, with college football playoff being its own kind of thing, with and with the Baylor thing happening the way that it did, with the sexual allegations, and the fact that the NCAA had no rules in place for such an event, the NCAA is as weak as it'll ever be. So one of the things that kind of cropped up, and we talked with Amanda Kristovich on this a little bit, was why can't the 5 conference commissioners come together and determine what's best for college football, determine what rules are best, determine what playoff works best, and allow the Power 5 to operate as a national brand and to do its thing, right? Because it makes sense. You can still preserve the local ability of it. You can totally do that. Because the initial thought when Oklahoma and Texas joined the SEC was, okay, we're preparing for another realignment of the conferences, and we might move towards something where the Power 5 does completely split itself from the group of 5, and all of these different things could happen. And of course, obviously, we're wrong because this alliance thing was put in place to combat that, even though in theory it doesn't. In word, it doesn't. We're not going to boycott the SEC, and you probably only say things like that to appease Clemson, as we've mentioned over the past 2 days, who routinely schedules the SEC as their out-of-conference power matchup. So what are you really trying to determine is best for college football? What are you really trying to determine is best for college sports? Like, sure, you can go and you can say, well, we'll have these matchups that are a little bit better, a little bit more valuable, but you're still not turning people away who are watching the ACC and the SEC or whatever game the ESPN has rights to from noon until late night. You're not turning them off of the ESPN network to go watch whatever you've got on Fox or whatever you've got on the Pac-12 network or whatever you've got on NBC or whatever. Like you're not doing it. You don't have the firepower to do it. You're resting everything on Ohio State and Clemson, and you're praying that somebody else returns to relevancy. You're praying that a team like Indiana can continue what it's doing, though you have no precedent to believe that's the case. You're praying that Michigan and Miami and Florida State and USC and Oregon, you're praying that they can all get to a point of relevancy where they can compete with SEC programs, and they can't. They've proven they can't.
And think it's not just Clemson, which by the way, we didn't even mention it. Clemson has a regular season locked in opponent against South Carolina. That rivalry is deep. They hate each other. It's a great rivalry, but it's not the only ACC team that does that. Florida State plays Florida. Georgia Tech plays Georgia. Louisville, Kentucky play, and they hate each other. Like, the ACC is so intertwined with the SEC that it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. Like, that's why they have to come out with this rhetoric that they're not going to shadow ban the SEC because they can't.
Because if they did, they'd lose some of their best programs.
Exactly.
And that's where it starts to turn into, well, why isn't this about money? Because when we look at NIL, when we look at the college football playoff expansion, when we look at so many of the evolutionary processes in college football, money is the root. But that means that you work hard on making sure the improvement works and matters. Because if you're not trying to make money, then what are you really doing? And for these guys, like, I don't think we understand how often these conferences turn over their commissioners. So for you to come into this agreement about playing, about scheduling each other in different sports, paying attention to academics and paying attention to lesser known sports and lesser funded sports, like, all that's great in theory, but you're not the NCAA. You can call this an alliance with a capital A, but without contract and without a contract and without a return on investment, then take the capital A away and this thing is useless. It is useless. It's much to do about nothing, and it makes zero impact. And the SEC has no reason to be concerned about it.
And what's going to be the point to this alliance whenever Alabama goes into the playoff and kicks Washington's ass? Or
that's assuming Washington could go.
Yeah, or not just Washington. Think about how, Alabama has also beaten Notre Dame's ass. They've been beaten Clemson's. Clemson was, a tighter matchup.
They've beat everybody, but it's not necessarily because when they're talking about the playoff, they're talking about trying to stymie the expansion because they want to make sure that's what's best for them. And that's what's best for you. That's not what's best for college football, because what's best for college football is a playoff expansion, because your regions can't get in outside of 2 teams. And that's your problem to solve. And the solution has been presented to you. You have the ability to get in once the expansion comes. But yet you're sitting here and fighting it because you don't know what's best for college football, because you have no frame of reference. And without anything to hold all of this together, it's useless.
And so they didn't say that they're going to prevent these teams from playing SEC, but that was the idea that we thought the alliance was going to be, and it's still an idea that could still happen
to a degree.
Which, if that happens, if this was the BCS era, okay, I guess I get it, because
right,
you're putting these results into a computer that can't comprehend what the alliance is. But this playoff committee is going to see right through this bull crap, and they're going to say, well, I mean, if Alabama can't play other teams that aren't in the SEC because these people have taken their kickball and gone home, then like, what are they supposed to do about it? They won't be able to damage the Alabama's playoff resume just because other teams have, said that you can't play SEC teams. It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense.
It doesn't. And from the SEC's perspective, and we got to get to a break, but from the SEC's perspective, it's less about, what you're taking away from us, because eventually you could say, well, if it's going to be more difficult for us to schedule these games with these out of conference opponents, then we'll just start playing inside of our own conference more often.
Just raise up conference
and having better competition than what you can provide between 41 programs. That's what the SEC and the SEC knows. No matter what, its conference champion is going to the playoff, 100% without a doubt. This poses no threat to them. And sure, the verbiage says it's not supposed to, but it so clearly is. It poses no threat to the SEC. It poses no threat on the TV market side. It poses no threat monetarily. It poses no threat to the college football playoff expansion. It poses no threat to anything. It's useless. I've said it 100 times. I can't
get a colony of ants, and we're like a size 12 shoe. They can team up all they want, but like, we're still going to stomp on them. It's not a big deal.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and discuss what some of the challenges that face the elite programs of college football this year. We'll talk about it. Off the Edge continues. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
With Indeed Instant Match, just sponsor a post and immediately receive a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit.
So you think you have unlimited data?
Recalculating.
Think again. If you're on a network you can't trust, then your data is limited, and so are you. Get unlimited and save with Total Wireless. Get 4 lines with unlimited data on 5G from the network more Americans depend on, with 100 gigabytes at high speed, then 2G for just $25 a month per line.
You have arrived at your destination.
Total Wireless. Do amazing. Available at authorized dealers. 5G capable device and SIM required. Actual availability, coverage, and speed may vary. See terms and conditions at totalwireless.com.
Don't miss a play at the Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Your front row seat to all the action. Place bets on all professional and most college sports at the counter, kiosk, or on your phone. Then catch the game on one of our 20 big screens from the comfort of the newly remodeled Timeout Lounge. Plus, the PRR Sports app gives you access to live, in-play sports betting. Sportsbook at Pearl River Resort. Be more than a fan. Be a player. Must be 21.
Benito's line cook just threw in his kitchen towel.
This order needs to go out right now.
He needs to find help before his customers are left waiting.
So sorry. We'll be right with you. Who's got table 6?
Indeed can help him hire great people fast.
I need Indeed.
Indeed you do. With Indeed Instant Match, we immediately show you quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed meet your sponsored job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
A hot summer afternoon, partly to mostly sunny with a few isolated showers or storms through the evening hours. The high today 94, tonight's low 72. For tomorrow, partially sunny with a chance of scattered showers and storms. The high at 91. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 91 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
You're listening to Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Hey, speaking of naming starting quarterbacks here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports. Jimbo Fisher named his starting quarterback for the 2021 season as well. Haynes King, who did play sparingly there at the closing seconds of the Alabama matchup last year, has been named the starting quarterback for the Texas A&M Aggies. So for those of you who have predicted that Texas A&M is going to be a contender in the West, based off of what Alabama has to replace, I don't see how, Haynes King stacks up to Bryce Young, but we'll see. Also in the SEC, Greg Sankey is out on a radio interview right now in Jacksonville and says that we need to rotate teams through our campuses with greater frequencies, and says that he has asked for scheduling feedback from athletic directors and also presidents and chancellors. That coming courtesy of Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports on Twitter at bmarcello. Yeah, you're damn right you do. It's been how long since Alabama's went to Florida? It's been how long since Florida's come here? I mentioned this a while back when I did a gallery on Alabama's records versus the SEC and other notable opponents. And that came out to be the fact that despite not having played Georgia Tech in almost 30 years, Alabama still played Georgia Tech more times than it has played South Carolina. South Carolina and Alabama have played a combined 15 times. That's redonkulous. Looking at the struggles, the challenges that these elite programs will have to make, I think it's interesting when you look, and of course, I'm talking about the big four, the elite programs: Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, and Oklahoma. 3 of those teams are all starting brand new quarterbacks, all sophomores, all California guys who grew up within 15 miles of each other or whatever. All big name dudes, all guys that can get the job done. But they also all have to start with incredibly difficult schedules. Now, Ohio State will start against Minnesota in Minnesota, but they will also host the Oregon Ducks. Those are 2 very difficult games, but it's also that one Power 5 matchup out of conference that's difficult. Luckily for CJ Stroud and the Buckeyes, that game is at least in the horseshoe. But when you look at Clemson having to take on Georgia, when you look at Alabama having to take on Miami, all 3 of these guys have big time matchups to start the season. And all 3 of these guys are also going into a season unlike last year. Remember, all these guys were freshmen last year, and they didn't get to experience the big crowds. Sure, as the season went along, you got more and more crowds. You got more and more opportunities to kind of see what that feeling was like to play in a college football environment, a big game environment in college football. But this year, it's expected to be much more realistic in terms of what's going to be available to you. Even if, a lot of universities, a lot of stadiums go in the direction of what LSU put out yesterday with vax passes or negative COVID tests, regardless of your opinion on that, even if that's the case, those stadiums are still going to be filled out. There's still going to be plenty of people there. So having those difficult early schedules, having those hostile environments, having those young quarterbacks, you're kind of looking for where the chaos can exist in college football this year. Because while it's easy to look at those 4 teams and saying, well, they've all got relatively easy schedules outside of their first few games, they should be able to run right through. You expect somebody to drop at some point. Somebody's got to lose because of the inexperience that all of those teams have on offense. Now, Oklahoma doesn't have quite the problem with their quarterback, but at center they're replacing somebody. There's always that problem where you don't know until you know. So I've always been on Team Chaos. As long as it doesn't hurt Alabama. Now, I'm on Team Chaos. I want to see some exciting things happen. I want to see how this Clemson-Georgia game kicks off. I want to see how Ohio State and Oregon handle each other. I'm excited to see how Alabama and Miami handle each other. And we're just 10 days away from that. 10 days away from the Alabama Crimson Tide taking on Miami. We're getting closer and closer. Tomorrow, it'll be single digits. Boy, this weekend's week 0, too. Week 0 is real football.
Illinois, Nebraska.
Turning it on, watching it hard. We're going to enjoy it. For Bryant Horn, I'm Jacob Harrison. The Jay Barker Show is up next, 12-2. Ryan Fowler takes you home 2-6. Tied tonight as well. Bryant Horn from 7 to 8 as well. Hop on with Horn. Until then, tomorrow at 11 a.m., I'm Jacob Harrison. Y'all have a great Wednesday, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Off the Edge.
Can't tell you how proud I am of our players, our team.
Join us every Monday from 8 to 10 and Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. on Tide 100.9 and the Tide 100.9 app.